Oh, can you tell us who are you and what do you do?
My name is Gabi Rudnick. I work at a small programming design studio here in Philly. We're like a super small team, and we design events and experiences inside large companies. I also have a hobby job on the side that I want to include because I feel like it's relevant for today. I work at the Barnes Foundation part time in the events like managing department. I absolutely love the Barnes, so I call it my hobby job because it fulfills my passions on the side. But yeah, that's what I do. And I am also a Venture for America former fellow, which is how we know each other.
So, Gabby, can you
Yeah.
tell us how did you fall in love with the arts?
I feel like it's been a lifelong process of like falling in love, forgetting about her for a little bit, then falling back in love. Um, I would say the biggest influence on of the arts was my grandmother, my bubby. She was the best. Growing up, would take my sister and I to an art museum every Wednesday, and they would be like local like art museums from like around where I grew up, like including the Woodmere Art Museum in Chestnut Hill, which like was always like magical because it sits in this like old stone house, and they would always have they have all the great art in there that they have in their permanent collection, and they would always have like a children's exhibit. So it was like really, I was like, oh my god, like my stuff could be up there, and like we would send stuff to be in there, and then it was like sort of made me feel like an artist, like I think as a kid. So I like really treasured those times, and I grew up going to the Barnes Foundation with my grandmother and the art museum, like the PMA Art Museum. And then she was sort of influenced by the arts through her relationship with my grandfather. He was a furrier and immigrated here and had a fur shop on Chestnut Street. So like deep roots in Philly, deep roots in sort of like I think fashion and sort of like being able to do what he did with coats like was an art form in a way. And he sort of had this like it's like was almost like a collective of people in his life that were in the arts or adjacent to the arts. So he had like a lot of friends that were like art dealers or like worked in like antique galleries. And then he also had a studio above his fur shop in the city where he would let artists stay there in like exchange for like art and a little bit of rent money. So that really influenced like a lot, I think, of my grandmother's and my grandfather's relationship. And they didn't get to travel a lot in their life. And my dad actually gifted them they used to sell these tickets like called a trip around the world. And you could like buy it and then you could like pick like I think a certain number of destinations. And then they went on that trip and it was like fulfilled my like grandmother's like dream of visiting so many art museums like around the world. And so growing up, I saw a lot of like art that she collected on her travels and like magnets and little like things like that. And so I think that really influenced my love for the arts because it sort of I felt like connected to like my ancestors through that and like sort of just fell in love with like the art form. And I always felt so calm like in galleries and like around art and just I think in more recent years gained an even greater appreciation for the arts and being like an appreciator of the arts.
Really beautiful, just hearing the impact that your family has had on you, and speak about your grandmother and like how he kind of introduced like an art from magnets and postcards to like actual fine art, and being in your home, I see that you kind of do a bit of the same. Can you tell us about like your style of collecting?
Yeah. So I feel like I've more recently started to take a more like serious approach to like how I want to build out my collection. I think it's obvious to say like if I had like endless amount of money, like my collection would look very different.
Yeah.
But I think that's like there's a lot of beauty in like the slowness and like intentionality of collecting things over time, and like they really become like a reflection of who you are throughout like your life. And so I have like as you in my house, like I remember like little things that I collected over time that sort of like represented like a thing that I was into at the time. So I sort of went through this phase where I was really into like ceramics and pottery. And I really do view like craftsmanship and like things made with the hands also as like fine art. And I think I was influenced by the Barnes Foundation because Albert Barnes collected a lot of like woodworking and furniture that and even like hinges on the wall that he would put like iron hinges, and so that impacted a lot of like how I viewed collecting. So from like ceramics and pottery, I also collected like plates and furniture that I like thought was really cool and like had like a design aspect that like spoke to me.
Yeah.
And then for more like fine art pieces, that's I have like sort of like a dream that like my whole house is filled with original work and like all tell like a story. And I find myself collecting pieces where I have like a connection to the artist's story or sort of like see something and it speaks to me. I feel like when you stand in front of a piece and like I think your body tells you a lot like internally of like if it is connected to you. So I love this Carissa Vardera like serigraph and I love her story and journey as an artist and I love like supporting women artists and female artists. So that was a reason and I I love the way it makes me feel when I look. But I'm hoping to collect more fine arts and even some like I'd love to add something like from the Impressionism era to my collection one day.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah,
Great. So, it's just you brought up a great point about like how, as you're going through your art collecting journey, you know, it's a question of what's the impact or the impression the art's leaving on you, and just like how that narrative starts to shape.
mm-hmm.
So, as you're thinking about your collection in the long term, what's like the narrative that you want your art
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a layered question. Um, I think I want people to feel like I want my home to be a reflection of me.
collection?
But I also think that I want my art to like explore like different sides of who I am. And so like I like to collect art that maybe like has like a political meaning and is like more um, sort of like creates like an anxiety almost when you view it. But I wouldn't say like I want people to feel anxious when they enter my home. So I think I sort of want to have like a very like layered collection with all different types of pieces. Um, and I'm sort of like finding how to make everything flow. Like I have some like abstract pieces and I have some more like watercolors and pastels and I'm still like figuring out how they all mend together, but I sort of love the different pockets of like life and part of pockets of the mind that they sort of like awake as you wander around my spiral little house.
That's great. So, can you tell? So, you're speaking about like your process of like, starting off. Of course, art collecting is a long term journey. So
Yeah.
you're like more like the beginning phases, if you will. But can you tell us about when you got your first piece? Like, what was that process like? Like, what was the piece? Like, is it here? And like, what's the
Yeah.
story behind it?
Okay, let me think. My first piece, I think I feel like I've collected like a lot, like over time. And the very first piece, gosh, I don't know. I think I collected like a lot of like watercolors back in the
Yeah.
day. I don't have them in my house right now. In my house, I would say like the earlier side of things I collected was that the abstract like pink in my office.
Okay.
That was one of the first. I went through like I was really into like abstract expressionism like pieces that were like broad strokes. And that's just like acrylic on canvas. Um, but yeah, I think I sort of fell in love with that. And then I collected like a lot of in I think a great way to start collecting art is collecting like lithographs or serigraphs where it's like a limited edition. The artist still touched the piece, but it's not like an original piece that's like crazy expensive.
Yeah.
So I think that was like a lot in my early collecting days. And then some of the pottery pieces where I've also like sort of fell in love with early on.
Yeah. So I know offline you spoke about you're taking like a pottery class right now, and you're like kind of into like ceramic pieces.
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious to like know like what phase of your art journey are you in right now, actually? Because you spoke about like how you're in like different phases as your collection grows. Like, what's your current phase?
My current phase is I really am into like ceramics right now.
Yeah.
I think it's like there's something so expressive about like making something physically with your hands and then you can hold it. Like painting is also like a similar thing, but there's some I just love sort of the end product and result and thinking about someone like molding each piece.
Yeah.
But I also I am really into like older oil paintings from like oddly enough like the 1800s. So I'm trying to source like something cool online right now. I sort of love the like idea of like something lasting so long.
Yeah.
Like I love like sort of the caretaking aspect of that, like thinking about how art sort of like lasts throughout like hundreds of years. So I would love to have something like older in my collection that sort of tells that part of the story, since I have some modern pieces from
Right.
like current artists that are living and working even in the city. I'm also on the hunt for a larger actually piece for this wall. And I would love a textile um, or something cool. There's this really dope artist. She's half based here and half based in Korea. And her name is Jenny Park, and she does like these super cool, like dyed watercolor paintings on Korean linen, and they're like gorgeous.
Yeah.
I would love that sometime soon.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
So offline you spoke about how you actually go about acquiring some of the pieces, art fair,
Yeah.
talking with artists, even like you got a piece from an auction house.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how do you go about like for somebody who's like totally new to this art game and
Yeah.
they want to start collecting, like how would you advise them like just go about and start collecting art?
Well, I would also say I'm very new. I still don't know what I don't know, which is why I love Timbuktu for sort of like helping me with that journey. Because I honestly think I'm trying to be more intentional about like how I want to collect in the future. Like I think that there's this like line where I collect pieces that I know and love because I want them in my home and I want to look at them and I want them to be a part of like my story. But I think there's this other side of like investing and using it as like a vehicle to like retain your wealth or even grow your net worth. I'm not quite there, but I think in my like the early stages, I would say to read a lot. Like one of my favorite things is, as you saw earlier, my like obscene amount of art books is like one, understanding what you like and don't like,
Yeah.
understanding the different like types of art, like you have textiles, ceramics, pottery, like we talked about, to paintings, understanding the eras, learning about like the people in your backyard that are creating art, like wherever you are. I think that's like a awesome way to start collecting, is to like go out and go to like your local art galleries or local art pop-up shows and talk to the people there, talk to the curator, talk to the gallery owner, and sort of get a pulse on like what's happening where you live. And then I also love going to art fairs. I think I told you earlier that one on my bucket list was to go to the Venice Biennale, which is like one of the oldest art fairs in the world, where they send a representative from each country to go and like showcase like the great work from that artist. And I went there in 2022 and it was like beyond. And I still like have inspiration from that trip and from those artists. And then auction houses. I use like a couple online sites and I just sort of scroll through endlessly when things are ending and see if I can snag a piece that's like in my price range that I love. And going to like antique shows and vintage shops is also a great way. I also am not like against getting like prints. I think a serigraph or lithograph is like a better way to go. But if you're starting out and you want to sort of explore what you like, getting a print and hanging it up and saying like, hey, do I like that? Is also a great way to sort of understand who you are like a bit better. But yeah.
So anything that you're excited about upcoming, what is like an art fair, art show, local or national, that's like on your radar?
That's a great question. Timbuktu is having a great. Well, honestly, though, like when we were chatting earlier, you were telling me about the New York Art Week and the sort of event you're hosting. I love that. There was just a recent gallery opening right around the corner, and it was a furniture actually show, which was super dope. I had just watched The Brutalist, that movie, and I was like, okay, I feel like I'm in The Brutalist with all this like cool like furniture design. Um, but there's two great special exhibits at the Barnes Foundation and the Philadelphia Museum of Art right now that I still need to go see. But yeah, and First Fridays are always dope in the Old City.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's sort of all my that's all on my radar right now. Do you have any do you have anything I should hit?
But definitely, like as we were saying offline, like I always believe like fairs are like the best thing for your bucks because you're able to just go like, go about all the galleries. So
Yeah.
there's like a bunch of fairs that's happening. Of course, like Freeze is happening during that New York Art
Yeah,
Week,
yeah, yeah.
but then Future Fair is a great one. You see a lot of merchant galleries and artists there. I really like 154 if you're into like African diasporic art as well.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
yeah,
Okay,
really
good
cool
stuff. Write these down.
Yeah. So definitely would love to just a couple more things.
Yeah.
One, I want to like bring it back to like your family,
Yeah.
right? Because we often talk about like how art can really like mend generations together, where you're passing down your artwork from like a family preservation standpoint or from a wealth building standpoint. But what really came across in our conversation was like a habit building standpoint, right? You talked about how your grandma would like go across and like magnets and postcards, but you do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think, I sort of I think the art world inherently can come off like as exclusive or elitist. And I'm like a firm believer that does not have to be the case. Like art is definitely a privilege, and I'm very grateful to like be able to build my collection. But like collecting a $3 magnet when you go to a museum like has sort of transformed my fridge into like a little like fun, quirky thing and part of my house that still evokes like art to me. And I showed you my postcard book that my sister gave me as a gift, which I love. And I collect, when I go to a museum, I try to like pick out the piece that spoke to me the most or made me like ask the most questions or I loved, and will buy that postcard and add it to my book. So I think there's a lot of ways to like sort of collect and have, be surrounded by art and sort of like live artfully. But my grandma, like I remember her like couple magnets on her fridge, and I sort of like always feel like her presence when I buy a magnet. But yeah, I feel like, did I answer the question?
Yeah, that was perfect. And the last question would be like for the person who wants to get into art collecting. I know you gave some tidbits beforehand, but any bit of advice for somebody who's like, oh, I'm not educated enough, or I don't have enough money, or we often have like reasons not to.
The excuse-a-thon.
The excuse-a-thon, right? What do you tell the viewer to get out of the excuse-a-thon?
Okay, get out of bed. Get to a gallery. No, but seriously, I think it is hard because I think honestly, I think that sometimes like walking into an empty gallery is like intimidating. And it's like, especially if you don't know what you don't know and you're like, I don't know if I can walk in here. And like, I would say you belong in every space you enter, and like really feel like, you're like, art is a place for community to come together and like a reason to like, it's truly like, I think one of the purest form of human expression. So always feel like you're there and like the art is for you. So I would recommend going to like local galleries. The curator and gallery owners are usually always so knowledgeable and can like help you through a lot of things. Like I said, reading art books and watching YouTube videos. And there's a great series. It's called, I might be like messing up the title, but it's called like How We See or something. And it's from the 70s. And it's like a crazy old like TV show, but it sort of like talks you through like how to view art and like perspective building and like sort of different ways to see the world, and that's also like I think really helpful to sort of like understand taste and like what you like as a person. And then going to art museums, there's always like discounted days or pay what you wish days. Like in Philly, there's First Fridays. So the first Friday of every month, most museums are free or discounted rates or have like a bar and music to go to. And then I say like bring a friend, like make it a instead of like going to get coffee or going to get a drink, like go see some art and sort of dip your toe in the water and see how you feel.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Gabby. This was
Yeah.
amazing. How can people stay connected with you?
You can let me plug my Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram. It's Gabriella Rudnick. And then you can connect with me on LinkedIn, also Gabriella Rudnick. Yeah, I don't really post much on Instagram, but please stay tuned, follow along.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Well, this is Maudie with Timbuktu, signing out.